thank you very much. It's a pleasure to introduce James Thornton, and it's great because your presence, James' presence, is an example of the different disciplines that work all towards the same goal. James Thornton is an environmental lawyer and social entrepreneur and the founding CEO of Client Earth, Europe's first public interest environmental law organization, operating globally by using advocacy, litigation, and research to address biodiversity loss, climate change, and toxic chemicals. The New Statesman has named Thornton as one of the 10 people who could change the world, while The Lawyer has picked him as one of the top 100 lawyers in the UK. A member of the bars of New York, California, and the Supreme Court of the United States, and a solicitor of England and Wales, he moved from Wall Street law practice to found the Citizens Enforcement Project at the Natural Resources Defense Council in New York, where he brought some 80 federal lawsuits against corporations to enforce the Clean Water Act. Please join me in welcoming James Thornton. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. It's a great privilege to be here, and I want to acknowledge my gratitude to Good Stuff and Hans-Ulrich and Brian in particular, and to all of you for being here. So I'd like to say my view of us as a species at the beginning, Homo sapiens. What characterizes us? One of the things that most sets us apart from other species is our ability to cause extinction events. We did this in our earliest days as a species. Back then, there were 5 or 6 other human species. Where Homo sapiens, there was Homo neanderthalis, Homo florensis, and various other of our brothers and sisters. Within a short time, there was only Homo sapiens. So we've been at this for a very long time. That brings me immediately to law. Why? You might think of law as a system of mutual consent that constrains our most aggressive and destructive impulses. A system that restrains our most destructive and aggressive impulses, and that we agree to have enforced against us when we violate it. So lots of forms of law, really most fit in with this: contract law, family law, human rights law, on, and indeed environmental law, my speciality. So a little more about my background. That's me in Alaska, a very nice place to be, lots of species left. So Client Earth was already briefly introduced. I want to tell you a little more context about what I do so that my remarks make sense. So I founded Client Earth 7 years ago when I discovered that in Europe there was no charitable organization of lawyers dedicated to defending the environment and supporting all of the green groups. In the US, where I had been, there were about 500 lawyers of this kind. In Europe, there was a very small handful. So it seemed to me there was an eco niche to fill. I started Client Earth, named because the Earth and all who sail upon her are our clients, and it's grown very quickly. So that 7 years later, I have 70 people with me working as lawyers and as people who support lawyers to save species, to clean up the air, reduce toxics, and all of the other environmental benefits that you would like to see. So today, though, let's talk about species. And I'd like to give you a couple of examples of things that are already successes and others that are in progress where law has helped us to save species. And I'm going to suggest, because of the very heady art environment in which we are today, that the way I use law, which is one of the largest and most complex constructions in civilization, very elegant in many ways, although far from finished, I would suggest that the way my team uses law may be thought of as a very complex conceptual art project. See what you think. So the first example involves what I saw 7 years ago as the largest biodiversity problem in Europe. The scientists, and I always start by talking to scientists, told me that the fisheries of Europe were about to collapse because they were so overfished, and indeed they were the worst managed fisheries in the world. Shocking given the sophistication of European culture, but apparently true according to the scientists. At that moment, the law, called the Common Fisheries Policy, that regulates fishing in all of the EU waters, was about to be revised. I said, here is the place to jump in and try and improve the law, because it was the law that allowed overfishing. Ministers would get together late at night in Brussels, listen to scientific advice, and then say, we're going to take 50%, 40 to 50% more fish than the scientists tell us is sustainable, and the law allowed that. So 6 years later, after a long battle, the good news is that when we as lawyers worked with all of the environmental organizations, worked with a number of enlightened member states in the EU, and with certain members of the Commission, the law is now much better. The law, instead of allowing overfishing in that way, will, if implemented, actually protect both fish and fisher people for the next 100 years and the foreseeable future. So a really great example of how what was thought to be one of the top biodiversity problems in Europe was able to be solved in a few years by creating a conceptual apparatus in law and science, that will allow the protection of species. A second one involving the threat of a lawsuit, because lawsuits are always fun. There's our fisheries mascot, by the way. The second one, and we're working to protect seals as well, involves the Habitats Directive, very powerful European law. This is one of the reasons you want the UK to stay in the European Union, because European environmental law for the UK and for other countries is an overarching umbrella of protection that prevents countries from doing disruptive things to the environment that may be locally appealing to politicians at the time. So here's an example. Under that law, the Habitats Directive, countries have to designate territory that is sensitive for various species. They did so in the UK for underwater regions where we had ancient, delicate corals and a whole variety of other organisms that are rare, endangered, and need protecting. Well, they were designated on paper, but for the 20 years up until the present, since the designation, the UK was allowing trawlers to come in and simply destroy all of that marvelous life. So, knowing this, we approached the government and said, well, let's think about this. If you continue to do this, we know you're violating the law, and we'll simply have to take you to court. After about a year of discussion, because these things don't go quickly, the government said, well, you're right, you have us banged to rights. So we set up a commission with environmental groups, fishermen, us, and the government to actually start protecting those areas. Here, it was simply being able to think about the law, the science, the underwater community in 3 dimensions, putting it all together, and this is why I say it's a kind of conceptual art project, and coming out with a discussion point and a conclusion that will all now be protected. Moving on to the land, let me introduce you to a friend of mine, Castor phoeber, otherwise known as the Eurasian beaver. Now, these have been locally extinct, that meaning, in this case, in England, since the 12th century. They were hunted into extinction by then for their fur, their meat, and their castor glands, which produced a substance that was well-liked in perfume. Now, mysteriously, a pair of beavers appeared a few years ago in East Devon in the River Otter. From what I understand, it's a very pleasant place to live. So pleasant that the beavers had a family. So now we're up to 6 beavers. Good, you would say. Rewilding England, you would say. What a good thing, because after all, we know that beavers build dams, change the shape of river systems, and as a result, reduce flooding. A big problem in England in the last few years, and it will only be more so during global warming. So great that beavers have returned, however they may have come. Not so, according to the government. The government is eager to capture them and confine them because it considers them a dangerous element. Remarkable, huh? Even going beyond that, the coalition government, which, as you will know, likes to call itself the most environmentally friendly government, the greenest government in history, proves that is not so by working on a bill at the moment called the Infrastructure Bill, which will make any species that becomes locally extinct be recategorized as a species that never lived here, a non-native species. What does that mean? That means that legally, if they are reintroduced, anybody can kill them as a pest species. So this would apply to beavers. It would also apply to red kites and fishing eagles, which have already been reintroduced, the lynx, wolf, bear, moose, things that all lived here, eagle owls, which are being reintroduced now, and quite a few lovely, harmless butterflies and plants. So what to do about that? The first thing is to fight this nonsense in Parliament, and then back to the Habitats Directive. If they make the mistake of passing a law here, such law would be illegal under European law. So we and other groups, we're talking to Friends of the Earth and many other people, would be able to go to court and challenge this outrageous law and very likely win. So that's the way others use law. Law is used on both sides in trying to protect species. A legal gambit that I need to beat. One of the biggest threats, as I'm sure has been mentioned already today, is global warming. And the question becomes, what can citizens do about global warming? What can a small group of people do if you don't have faith in global governments getting together in Paris next year and actually solving the problem? And while my hopes are high, my faith is small that that will happen. So I've put together a team, I'm in the process of putting together a team, funded by a consortium of foundations that will be a 10-person litigation team that will attempt for the first time globally to use litigation to attack things that cause global warming. For example, as I'm already doing, trying to stop coal-fired power stations, and I've stopped a bunch of them in Poland and in the UK. And there the idea, and the idea throughout this, is to make the business risk higher for bad environmental actions. Increase the business risk. So when the markets and governments aren't telling companies what to do, citizens, by using litigation, may be able to move behavior in the right direction and make the markets follow ethics. And the ethics would come from those ethics that were embedded in the legal system and can be leveraged by clever use of the law. So this litigation program will use company law, it will use securities law, fiduciary law, energy law, tort law. None of it is actually environmental law. So one of the reasons I say it's a conceptual art project is there isn't just an environmental law book you can open to do this work. You need to think of what the problem is, conceptualize clearly your goal, and then find legal tools distributed throughout the culture that you can mobilize to move the society in the direction you want to see it go. And it can be highly effective. One of the things I'd like to share with you is a very positive experience I just had in Beijing. We all know that China has emerged as the leading CO2 emitter, as the most polluted country. And the good news is that during this visit, I became convinced that there's a quiet revolution going on in China. The invitation came from the Chinese Supreme Court, quite a great invitation to go and give them a seminar on environmental enforcement. How do you enforce environmental laws, and how do you make it possible for citizens to bring environmental cases of exactly the type that we like to bring? The idea being that they understand, and they're very, very transparent, saying we know that our citizens are demanding this, so we have to give it to them. We know that people are dying of pollution, we need to clean it up, and we know that the Chinese economy will not continue to prosper because the levels of pollution are becoming so high. But they've gone much beyond that, and they've amended their constitution to say that China shall become an ecological civilization. And they're working at the level of the Council of State on what that actually means, with the aspiration of perfecting what it means to be an ecological civilization and then exporting the model to other countries. An astounding shift. Now they've taken more steps than that. They've passed a new environmental protection law, which is much stricter than anything they had before, which allows citizens to bring suits and penalize officials who don't enforce environmental law. It allows them to impose very large penalties on polluters. And it creates an environmental panel of the Supreme Court of China, and then on all of the lower courts. Now, this goes beyond what we have in Europe. We don't have environmental tribunals like this in Europe. In most countries, including this country, we don't have the ability for citizens easily to bring cases against polluters. Indeed, it's virtually impossible in the UK to bring a case against a polluting company. But it will become, as of January 1, quite easy in China. Remarkable, huh? Then there's behind that, a very good new air quality law and water quality law that are following, as well as environmental taxation. So the hope is that China will begin to take the lead, having recognized the seriousness of its problems, and then perhaps lead us. I remember as a kid in the United States, when the Russians launched Sputnik, the United States, which had no particular interest in the space race, said, we can't let the Russians beat us. We've got to get really good at this. Let's land a man on the moon. So I'm hoping that if the Chinese begin to take the lead, perhaps the very recalcitrant United States on these issues will say, well, we need to compete here. And what virtuous competition that would become. One of the cool things the Chinese just did 3-4 weeks ago was pass, on the subject of our meeting today, a law about the extinction of animals. Very specific one. In Chinese culture, it has become popular to go to very expensive restaurants that serve you endangered species, rare and endangered species. It's like something out of a science fiction movie. It's horribly fascinating. And these have become quite popular. So the 4 species of pangolins, for example, that are globally endangered are all on the menu in China, rhino, lots of other things. The new law, but this wasn't illegal. Many things which lead to the extinction of species are not illegal. So I think of us as having environmental law 1.0. That's where we're living now. If we properly enforced all of the environmental laws, we still wouldn't properly protect everything, although we would do a much better job. We need to continue to evolve the law, as I was saying about fisheries in Europe. That's what China has just done about the consumption of animals, remarkably. So they passed a new law saying it will be a criminal offense to serve in a restaurant or sell in a market any of a list of, I think it was 132 animals, and it will be a criminal offense to purchase or consume all of these animals as well. And the judges tell me they intend to enforce it. They think this is one of the sort of landmark laws that will get people's attention, as indeed it would if they enforced it. And for good or ill, the criminal penalties in China can be quite extreme. Now, as I'm aware of my time, I just want to leave you with a thought of what might you do. You're all here because of an interest in the fact that we're in the 6th great extinction. As I said, we started it as soon as we were a species. It's followed us like a wildfire everywhere we walk on the planet. But the fires have been growing. We're in the 6th great extinction. What can we do? There are obvious things. I'm sure none of you would, but don't buy ivory. Don't buy anything from that are products that encourage the destruction of biodiversity. Learn more. That's why you're here today. It's marvelous that we're all together. Learn more about extinction. The book by Elizabeth Kolbert, The 6th Extinction, is a marvelous textbook on this. Very well written, New Yorker writer, very good. I would say, equally important, stay hopeful. One reason I've been showing you beautiful pictures is that those pictures are still a mark of the reality on the planet, and citizens can do things, as I've been trying to suggest. Small groups of people can have an enormous impact on this. Just a handful of people, when they dedicate themselves in the right way and figure out their art project and push it hard, 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 can make a big difference, can change the way countries behave and save entire species or indeed entire ecosystems. It's happened many times, and it can happen many more times. So stay positive, stay hopeful, demand action. I mentioned our current government. Now, the law that is trying to pass that would make any species which was temporarily not in the country a non-native species subject to being slaughtered when it was reintroduced is the most extreme example of an anti-environmental law that you can imagine. There are many more such laws in lobbyist minds. They are introduced periodically in all countries, and they need to be stopped. So citizen action, political action, very, very important. Supporting organizations who do that kind of action, very important and very valuable. Demanding action, requiring action. And then finally, I would say appreciation. So at the base of all of this desire to save nature, at the base of all of our aspiration to participate in appreciating art, creating beautiful sentences for each other, everything that we do in that way, it's all about appreciation. And nature needs our appreciation, needs us to tune our faculties, our appreciative faculties on it, so that informed by that innate, deep dialogue that occurs when you do appreciate the living world, you will be moved in the right way to do the right things to save us all together. So, thank you very much.